National Assembly Director, Rules and Procedural Matters. Thank you so much for joining me on this day.
Thank you for having me here.
Let's start first of all with understanding this role that members of parliament have. Many citizens expect that members of parliament should deliver direct development projects in their various constituencies, and yet the constitution is very clear. It primarily defines them as legislators and representatives. How should the role of the MP truly be understood in Zambia's governance system?
The role of a member of parliament in Zambia is fourfold. In short, there are about 4 functions of members of parliament. One, they are legislators, they make laws. 2, they are representatives of the people, particularly for the constituency-based members of parliament. Then, they're also responsible for oversight over government activities or activities of the executive. And finally, they are responsible for passing the budget. If I go through maybe just to expand on that, if we look at representation, they represent the interests of their constituents and bring issues affecting their constituents to Parliament for the executive or the government to take action on those. Then if you look at the budgetary approval process, when the budget is made by the executive, it is brought to Parliament for approval. In that process of approval, the budget itself is examined in detail. Each head of expenditure is looked at from left, right, and center. And where things are not clear, the Minister of Finance is summoned or some other government officials are summoned to come and explain until everything is clear. And then it's brought before the House. Then it is passed. Then when we look at legislation, I think this one is probably the most common one, which everyone understands, is making laws. Laws are usually brought by the executive, but the backbenchers also have an opportunity to bring laws for enactment. So when a law is brought, it passes through various stages before it is finally passed or not passed. Then, with regard to oversight, there are several oversight mechanisms that Parliament uses to hold the government to account. For instance, we have the committee system. Through various committees, particular wings of government or departments of government are checked to see whether they are being run according to what is prescribed. The other form of oversight is through questions. Backbenchers pose questions to ministers, and the ministers are expected to give responses on exactly what the question is demanding. I think that is one of the most popular mechanisms, because nearly on each day we have questions which are posed to the ministers.
Very interesting what you've outlined, and I'll pick on some of the things that you've said. When you were introducing the discussion around representation of the people, you said members of parliament that are constituency-based. Members of parliament that are constituency-based, and this is to suggest or indicate that there are other types of members of parliament. Would you explain to the viewer the other types of members of parliament that are there, apart from the 156 constituency-based MPs?
Right. In addition to the 156 members of parliament who hold constituencies, we have 8 who are nominated by the president. Those do not hold the seats, but they are also members of parliament, and they perform basically almost the same things, of course, except the part of representation, since they do not have a particular constituency. But being members of parliament, then they represent everyone else across constituencies, unlike those who hold particular constituencies. Yes.
So those are the only other members of parliament that we've got. Do we also consider, people like the vice president, the speaker,
Yeah,
and the like?
we still have 3 other members of parliament, apart from those 8. We have the second deputy speaker, who is elected from outside parliament, but from amongst people who qualify to be members of parliament. We also have the honorable speaker, who is also elected from outside parliament, does not have a seat, does not have a constituency seat. Then we also have the vice president of the Republic of Zambia. He's also a member of parliament. So that brings together the composition of the National Assembly to 167 members of parliament. 156 who hold constituencies, 8 who are nominated by the president, and then we have 2 presiding officers or speakers and the vice president.
When we look at members of parliament and how they strike the balance, would you tell me how parliament strikes a balance between MPs' legislative duties, making and amending laws, and increasing expectation from constituents for MPs to deliver tangible development using, for example, the Constituency Development Fund?
I think members of parliament, first of all, at the beginning of a parliamentary calendar, the calendar is drawn out, which shows how many times parliament will sit and from which date to which date. Then in between, we have breaks. Actually, parliament sits 3 times in a year. We have the first sitting, which we are in now, from September to December. Then we have the next one, and the main focus of this sitting is budget approval process. Then we have the next one, which comes from February to March, April. That one, the main focus is legislation or passing legislation. Then we have the last one, which comes from June to July and sometimes into August. That one is, we call it the meeting for adopting committee reports. Now, those are just the major focus on a particular meeting, but that does not mean that's the only business which is considered. Other businesses come in, but the major focus is one of those. So when the House is not sitting, for instance, the House will adjourn in December, during that break, members of parliament are expected to go back to their constituencies and go and carry out the other functions. Not all of them are expected, because some may be involved in committee work or other activities which take place during the break. But the majority of them, I think, will have the time where they can go to their constituencies and carry out the other functions, such as inspecting CDF projects, and also any other developmental activities that are going on in their constituencies. And also even just to meet the people, hear from them. He may have a message from them from Parliament, that in the last sitting of Parliament, this is what happened. And the people may also have something to share with him or to bring for his attention. Yes.
When you highlight these issues, is it then fair for citizens to have an expectation that members of parliament must directly administer development in their constituencies? Because if they speak on behalf of the people, for example, representing the people, then they can speak with regards to development as well. So is it a fair expectation for members of the public to expect development to come from their MP?
Probably it's a misunderstanding. From the explanation I gave, the Member of Parliament is not directly involved in taking development. Their role is, of course, to lobby, bring issues to Parliament, present the problems which they have. For instance, if they need a bridge at point A, it's the duty of the MP to bring to the attention of the executive, because the pace lies with the executive. And when that money is released, or construction of a particular bridge has been approved and is released, it's the duty of the MP to follow up the process until completion. Otherwise, it's not the duty of the MP to go and build that bridge. His duty is to facilitate, to push government to ensure that that particular bridge is constructed. Probably we need to do more to sensitize the people on the role, what the role of an MP is.
So an MP lobbies for the development to be taken there,
Precisely.
and they lobby from a different arm of government. But within this context, who then, should I ask, should be held accountable for administration of development? If, for example, the people do not have a bridge and a member of parliament says they lobbied, they did go to parliament and they told the house that there's a bridge that is needed in Rhodes Park and this bridge is not brought forward, who must be held accountable in this case?
That's a little bit difficult to say who must be held accountable, because let's take Parliament, the 156 MPs, each one has got issues in their constituencies, and they submit all of them to the executive. Now the executive has to sit down and plan and evaluate and look at a particular need. In this area what they need is this, in this area what they need is this. Then I'm sure they have to come up with a plan to see which one is a priority against which one can be done first, which one can come second, and so on and so forth. Then from there they start implementing. But it's the role of the MP to also follow up with the executive. How far have you gone with this project which I requested? When is it coming? Mind you, Jonah, the resource envelope is always not adequate to meet all the needs at the same time. But if you plan to move in a certain way, by the end of a certain period, you should be able to accomplish what you had intended to.
Before I leave this issue, how does this work in terms of registering these concerns from the various constituencies and them arriving at the executive? Does Parliament or National Assembly issue reports to the various ministries or various arms of government on some of the demands being made by members of Parliament, or how does this demand reach these responsible wings of government? Is it just on the floor and the various ministries take note of what's happening, or is there another way that these issues are brought to the attention of government after the member of Parliament speaks on the floor?
I think it's twofold. Mind you, the government is everywhere throughout the country. So at a local level, let's take a district like, say, Kabombo. If they need a school, it's not that until the MP goes to Parliament to go and make a representation that we need a school in this area. There is an education office at the local level, I'm sure, which will be notified. Then through the structures, they also pass on that information to the executive, that here we need this. And then the MP will also use his forum, his or her forum, which is Parliament, to bring the issue to the attention of government, that in that particular area, we need a school. And as I said, that is not the only request which will sit on the table of the executive. There will be probably similar requests from elsewhere. And so it's now up to the executive to sit down and plan to say in which area are we going to start with first, depending on the resources which are available.
When you talk about Parliament, you were mentioning some things that a lot of people may not exactly understand, probably heard but not understand, like backbenchers in Parliament. And perhaps not the most pleasant for people to hear, because when they think of backbenchers, they think of backbenchers in high school, for example, who were probably notorious. What do these aspects of Parliament mean, and what role do they play in effective functioning of Parliament?
All right. Thank you for that question. Maybe let me take this opportunity to explain. After a general election is held, the first institution which is constituted is Parliament, because members of the public elect members of Parliament. When the House has been constituted, then the President, who has won the elections, has to come up with a cabinet. Now that cabinet is drawn from parliament. In some countries they even call it like a council of ministers. Now, after those have been appointed as ministers, they are still members of parliament, but then they have an additional role of a minister. Now, when they are in parliament, in order to distinguish between a minister and a non-minister, so those who are not ministers are referred to as backbenchers. In the case of our parliament, let's take the time during the one-party participatory democracy time. Ministers would take the front benches, while those who are not ministers would take the back benches. So that's where that term of backbencher comes from. It's just the seating arrangement, where the ministers will sit in front, and then those who are not ministers will sit behind. So that's why that's why they are referred to as backbenchers.
There are other people in parliament that people hear of quite a number of times. There's a government whip and the leader of opposition. What do these people do, and are they backbenchers?
Okay. Technically, those two are backbenchers. But because of the role that they've been given, they've been elevated to the level of a cabinet minister. Let's start with the the government chief whip. The government chief whip coordinates the work of parliament as well as the work of the executive. Mind you, the executive is drawn from parliament. So the chief whip is there to mobilize, first of all, his party, to also mobilize the ministers with regard to their roles in parliament. Then on the other hand, the leader of opposition is also more like a coordinator of the largest opposition party.
So the leader of opposition is responsible for only one political party in parliament, which is the largest.
Yes.
And not all the other opposition political parties.
In general terms, he's also responsible for all the other parties, but mainly it's the largest opposition party. For instance, if maybe they've got some issues which they would like attended to, they can meet as an opposition front, raise those issues, which the leader of opposition can then pass on to the management of parliament to look into.
Is these two responsibilities that we've talked about, the chief whip and the leader of opposition,
yes,
are these two individuals paid for these roles? Apart from being a member of parliament, are they paid for being a chief whip? Are they
yes.
paid for being a leader of opposition?
Yes, they are paid, because those are extra responsibilities which they carry. As I said, the two offices are at the level of a cabinet minister. So in terms of what they get, I think it's equivalent to what a cabinet minister gets.
Is there a mechanism that Parliament has put in place to hold its members accountable with regards to their people? You said that Parliament allows for these members of Parliament to go out there sometimes at a certain period to meet their constituents, hear back from their constituents. Is there a mechanism that has been put in place to ensure that they remain accountable to the people who elected them?
Yes, there is. Probably the quickest one I can talk about is the establishment of constituency constituency offices. Each of the 156 constituencies has a parliament office in those constituencies with staff employed by parliament. And those are points of maybe bridging the gap between the constituency and parliament. Through that office, Parliament gets information on what activities are taking place in the constituency. including visits by the member. But in addition to that, I think we also have other platforms. Like we have Parliament TV, we have Parliament Radio, we have social media platforms which are used just to engage the public and Parliament as well as the Member of Parliament.
One of the main roles that Parliament has is to hold the executive accountable.
Okay.
But in practical terms, how do MPs effectively exercise the oversight of this function, and what support do the various offices that are there at Parliament provide to strengthen this role?
There are various mechanisms that the backbenchers use to hold the executive to account. For instance, I think the one which I referred to earlier on was the question time, where backbenchers can bring all manner of questions, put them across to the executive, and the ministers have to respond. Then we also have motions. There's a popular one which we call the private members motion. This is a mechanism which which empowers the backbenchers to bring issues to the attention of the executive. For instance, to remind them of something which the backbenchers have noticed they are not doing and yet they're supposed to do. We have a committee system where backbenchers form small groups called committees, and these committees oversee or tackle the various segments of the executive to see how they're operating, whether they're following the laid down procedure, whether they're achieving the objective for which they have been set. And if that committee finds that something is amiss, at the end of the year, they produce a report where they highlight all those issues and also make recommendations for government to make amends. That report is laid on the table of the House, it's circulated to all the members, and it's debated. And at the end of it, a vote is taken. For instance, if the vote has been, the vote is in favor of the report, or the report has been adopted, then the executive is obliged to give a response to Parliament to explain how they will attend to those issues which were concerned in that report. And so that's a form of, another form of oversight. We have the Public Accounts Committee,
Probably
which
the
goes through
popular committee.
yes, which examines the report of the Auditor General and brings out all those issues. That's another mode of holding the executive to account. We also have the Local Government Accounts Committee, which does the same, similar to what the Public Accounts Committee does, only that one is, I think, more concerned with the local government system. Then in all these activities, the backbenchers are supported by the Office of the Clerk. For instance, we have the Research Department, which offers various research services to the committees and even to individual members in making them carry out their oversight function. We have the Journals and Table Office Department, which helps in processing questions and motions, all that intended to assist the backbenchers hold the executive to account. We have the Legal Department, we have the Library Department. All these, they fall under the Office of the Clerk, and they are all meant to facilitate the work of the backbenchers.
When you talk about committees, like, for example, the Public Accounts Committee, the Local Government Accounts Committee, a lot of people follow these proceedings, and this is because they're talking about mostly public resources.
Yes.
But there's also one thing that is true, that the Public Accounts Committee is not a court overall, and there is no conclusion that's going to result into somebody being taken to court or being sent to jail or anything like that. But why should people consider this exercise important, and how does it ultimately result in people being held accountable?
As I explained earlier, the let's say, take the Public Accounts Committee. They look at the findings of the Auditor General, and from there they make recommendations to the executive. For instance, if money for Project A was misapplied, the committee will make recommendations for the executive to act on the people involved. Then there it's up to the executive now to take action. But it doesn't end there. When they've finished taking that action, they are required to report back to Parliament that on those recommendations, on those findings, this is what we have done. We have a committee called the Committee on Government Assurances. It follows up all those activities.
All those assurances?
All those assurances, yes. And whatever matters were contained in reports that have been were adopted by the House. And those assurances, they remain on the books for as long as they've not been fulfilled. If they haven't been fulfilled, for instance, in 2024, then in 2025 they are raised and brought back to the attention of the executive that we are waiting for this until they are done away with. That's when the Committee on Government Assurances forgets about them.
There's one practice that the public hears about every so often with parliamentarians, and this is members of Parliament walking out, especially members of Parliament from the opposition. When they're displeased, they walk out. And some members of the public find this rather odd. Are members of Parliament allowed to walk out of proceedings, and when do some of them get in trouble for walking out?
Yes, Parliament is a democratic institution, and if someone is not happy with anything, they are free to walk out. Of course, maybe they can walk out, maybe to go and cool down, or go and liaise outside, and afterwards they come back. What would not be permissible is for them probably to walk out and then leave Parliament the whole day, because they have a duty to represent their people. But mere act of walking out of the chamber, that one is allowed.
So that's very clear that it's allowed for members of Parliament to walk out.
Yes.
And this is even when they disagree, they can walk out.
Yes, if they are not happy with something, they are free to walk out. But maybe let me just qualify that. Their walking out should not disrupt the sitting of the House. Yes.
What about the relationship that Parliament or the National Assembly has with the public? And this is because obviously this is House of the People. Mm-hmm. It is, I know that it is there with Parliament TV, it's there with Parliament Radio. But how open is Parliament to members of the public? To what extent can members of the public be a part of the National Assembly?
I think under the reforms that are ongoing at Parliament, the institution has made efforts to be open to the public, and I think to date continues to encourage the public to engage with the institution. For instance, we encourage people to visit Parliament and just to see how business is undertaken on the floor of the House. And to this effect, I think nearly every day now, there's always a group of visitors that come. Then, of course, we have radio and TV stations, and the public are encouraged to get in touch, I think, especially on some programs, if they have any issues, to have them clarified. We have a public relations department, which also issues statements from time to time aimed at strengthening our ties with the public out there. And the constituency offices also, for those who are far away from Parliament, are centers where the public can engage Parliament through those constituency offices. We even call them information centers because some of, all of them are now even stocked with some information on Parliament. So the members of the public, especially in rural areas, if they want to learn something about Parliament, they can simply walk to the constituency office and ask our staff there whatever questions that they have, and they can help them. So these are just but some of the mechanisms that Parliament is trying to strengthen engagement with the public.
The Parliamentary and Ministerial Code of Conduct outlines standards of integrity as well as accountability. How does this code guide members of Parliament's behavior, and what actions are taken when a member of Parliament breaches ethical or conflict of interest rules?
I think that code of conduct is meant to guide our members of Parliament, both backbenchers and ministers, like to guide them on how they should conduct themselves while holding that office. There are issues of, for instance, conflict of interest. When you are dealing with a matter in which you have an interest, you are expected to disclose or excuse yourself. That can be part of this because you have this interest. Now, where that code is broken, there is a committee which is responsible for carrying out a hearing on the concerned member who may have broken that code. And the committee will invite the member, and they also bring in witnesses, and at the end of it, they will pass a recommendation to the Honorable Speaker that what should be done on this case is this. Depending on the severity of the matter, a member may be censured or a member may be suspended. And in the worst scenario, they may even lose their seat.
Is this conduct only in the grounds of Parliament, or does it apply even when the Member of Parliament is going about their business outside of Parliament?
It depends on exactly what they've done. For instance, if whatever is done outside Parliament, it was done in their capacity as a Member of Parliament, then they are answerable. Whether it was inside Parliament or outside Parliament.
From your observation, from your experience, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that the public has about what members of Parliament are supposed to do, and how can Parliament help to bridge this understanding gap?
I think if we go back to what we talked about earlier, the misconception of what the role of a Member of Parliament is. Of course, politicians also, when they are campaigning, they talk about, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. Instead of saying, I'll facilitate for the construction of a bridge here, you say, I'll put up a bridge here. I'll facilitate for the construction of a school, I'll put up a school here, and so on and so forth. So sometimes the public follow up on those. But the truth of the matter is, a construction of a school, a bridge, whatever development, it comes from the government, from the executive, because that's where the resource envelope is. But of course, that is not to take away from an individual Member of Parliament who may have extra money. I mean, if a Member of Parliament has extra money, he or she can sink a borehole for their people in their constituents from their pocket. So I think the major focus really is to sensitize the people on what the role of a Member of Parliament is. And what is not the role of a Member of Parliament. I think the major point here is the role of a Member of Parliament is to facilitate development for their area.
Members of Parliament often face tension, and I believe you've witnessed this between following the party line but also representing the independent views of their constituents. How does Parliament guide or support members of Parliament in balancing the party line that they're part of, or whichever political ideology they support, and national interest?
When members are elected at the beginning of the Parliament, for instance, let's talk of the current House. It was elected in 2021. Before the members even took their seats, a rigorous induction is held to just try and bring them to introduce them to what is expected of them. That as a member of Parliament, you're expected to do this, you expect to do this. So a lot of capacity building workshops are held to prepare them to take up their role as a member of Parliament. And with regards to the issue of maybe an individual member's interest versus the party interest, in the chamber, a member is free to vote the way they want. They are not bound by the party issues, no. If there are party issues, though, that are dealt with outside Parliament, a member of Parliament, for instance, cannot be penalized by Parliament because he voted against a particular party. No. In Parliament, members are free to vote the way they want. So it's up to them which direction to take on a particular matter. Yes.
Let me take you back a little bit before we wind up our interview. And you were, when we were talking about representation of the people, I just want to get it clear. Is there anything members of the public can do when a member of Parliament, for example, is not in touch with them? This has been a common complaint by a lot of people, that after an election, their member of Parliament disappears and they resurface when there's another election that comes up. Are the public helpless, or is there something they can do to bring this to the attention of the National Assembly?
At the moment, well, there's something they can do, yes. Through the constituency office, they can bring the matter to the attention of Parliament that our MP hasn't been seen. Then the Parliament, I'm sure, can find an opportunity to sit down with the member that we've received these complaints from your constituents. Is there anything you can do to strengthen your relations with the people who voted for you? But outside that, like provision the Constitution, there is nothing provided for, like say, a member can be recalled because they are not, not that I'm aware of.
One of the things that obviously people talk about and is public trust, finally, in Parliament, which is essential for democracy. What steps is the National Assembly taking to promote transparency, civic education and professionalism among members of Parliament so that the institution remains credible and respected?
I think a number of activities are in place. As I said, various capacity building programs have been held, and both within the country and sometimes outside the country. And we've had some good working relationships with some NGOs that have come to help us undertake these capacity building programs. And like I said at the beginning, in the course of the interview, when members have been elected, they're inducted through various mechanisms to bring them to understand what is expected of them as members of Parliament.
Finally, what does it mean when Parliament says, or members of Parliament say they have immunity when they are on the floor of the House based on what they say and everything in between? What exactly does it mean that they have immunity?
That immunity is conferred on them for what they say in the House. For instance, if he, how do I put it? The idea of that immunity is meant not to constrain members of parliament from raising issues that are important for their people or for the nation. It's really not meant to make them say things which they are not supposed to. The idea of that immunity is just meant to ensure that when they stand up to speak, they can speak freely without the fear of what. But that does not mean to say because of that immunity a member can say anything. No. If they go outside what is provided for, usually they are guided by the presiding officer.
But they
for instance, I think the common one is where maybe a member of parliament is talking about an individual who is not in the house, accusing them of something, and what the presiding officers would guide that no, you can't talk about that person because they are not here to defend themselves.
But the member of parliament really wouldn't get in trouble outside of parliament in that case, based on the person they spoke about.
Pardon?
But the member of parliament would not get in trouble outside of parliament based on what they say in that house.
In the house, precisely. For instance, they can't be taken to court to say this member said this in the house about me. They are protected in that scenario. In fact, that immunity, it also extends to, say, people who come as witnesses before committees. When they enter the committee room, the committee chairperson explains to them that while we are here, we expect you to say the truth, and as much as you know a particular thing. But they also caution them that please do not deliberately mislead us, because if it is established that you misled us, then there will be consequences again. So just be honest, say what you know, and what you don't know, then don't say it. But you are protected that you will not be taken to court to say, when you appeared before such a committee, you said this.
Mr. Jimmy Sabi, thank you so much for joining us on this.